Hello everyone and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah. In my last video we talked about some helpful reminders for a more minimal Black Friday, and today we're going to continue that theme as we look at ways to have a more minimal and intentional holiday season. There's obviously a lot of beautiful moments that can come out of the holiday season, but also a lot of stress, overconsumption, and some negative feelings too. But I think a more minimal approach can help us avoid some of the negative and have more of the positive moments shared during that time. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The first tip is to avoid being extra and overcomplicating things. One restaurant that Jake and I enjoy getting food from sometimes is a place called Chipotle, and they don't really say this much anymore, but if you want a guacamole on your burrito or your burrito bowl, they would ask you, or they'd let you know that it was extra cost. And I've seen shirts that I think are a little bit funny that says something like, or that say something like, guac is extra and so am I. The idea of just doing a lot. And with that, I know I can be a bit of an extra person sometimes myself and just have a lot of excitement. But when it comes to the holiday season, we might be doing things or continuing different habits or traditions that are a little bit extra and just too complicated or too much. For example, some families get really into baking cookies in the holiday season, and that's awesome. You know, I love cookies and, bake as many cookies as you want. But if you're making cookies, some people might be very stressed out if they're trying to make 8 different kinds. And I don't know necessarily how many kinds of cookies people make. But if this cookie baking is, a whole day or just a lot of stress, maybe you could reduce the amount of cookies that you're making or simplify and streamline different activities. Maybe you have developed a tradition with your family where there are, all these different things back to back, or there's some really stressful gift shopping. How could we simplify that and reduce a little bit so you aren't feeling so frazzled? When there's too much on our plates, we can't enjoy everything as much. You might feel like you're rushing around. You might be more exhausted. It's just not a recipe for having a great time. If we can cut a few things that maybe aren't as necessary or make some swaps so that there's never too much all at once, then that's going to help us enjoy what we are doing a lot more and eliminate that added stress or chaos. So I encourage you to look at your schedule, look at the way that you celebrate holidays and what you're doing, and see if you can simplify it a little bit. Even simplifying like the decorations if you find that you're stressed about having to put them away after. Just figure out what works for you, and a little bit of simplicity can go a long way. Building off of that last tip, tip number 2 is to rethink and reflect about holiday traditions. Just because a tradition exists doesn't mean that it needs to continue existing forever, and it might not even continue to add the same value that it once did. Times change, people change, families change, and you may find that if people aren't necessarily getting a lot of value out of a certain tradition, or it's not necessarily worth the time, cost, and energy involved, maybe it's not worth it. Or maybe you can rethink traditions based upon the needs of people in the family or the group. For instance, gift giving can often be a major stressor in the holiday season. And maybe there's always been a certain way that people have given gifts. Maybe everyone has purchased gifts for all the other people, but is that a lot of gifts? Is that amount of money needing to be spent? Is everyone enjoying all of those gifts? You could simplify it and maybe adjust the traditions to do a different type of gift giving exchange. Maybe you do Secret Santa where there's only one person that you're buying gifts for. Maybe you shift it and do an experience instead that the whole family can enjoy and not necessarily have all these new gifts that they have to deal with and maybe they don't want later on. Maybe you shift to more of a white elephant gift exchange where you find something random from your home and it just turns into a very humorous experience. Rethink some of these traditions if they're no longer working and adding value. Tip number 3 is to spend more quality time with people you care about and more time doing those simple pleasures, the simple things that are really fun, rather than focusing on the stuff. When you reflect about your favorite parts of the holiday season, I'm guessing it's not the stuff. That's maybe, more of an afterthought, but a lot of it, at least in my opinion, comes from the buildup of the holiday season. The cozy moments, with your hot tea or hot chocolate. Maybe you are spending extra time with family listening to fun music, seeing snowflakes, or whatever, weather you're experiencing there. These simple moments, I think, can be a lot more meaningful and really help us feel that holiday spirit rather than physical items. And if we can lean into those simple pleasures and more of those moments, rather than focusing as much or spending as much on stuff, I think that can make a big difference. So I encourage you to really reflect about your favorite moments and see how can you do more of that so you have an even better holiday season without stress, time, cost. A lot of these you're seeing are pretty similar here. Tip number 4 is to communicate. Communication is going to help you so much in life, but a couple things you might want to communicate with other family members or friends about are gifting, expectations people have about the holiday season, and priorities. What matters here? What do you want to emphasize? Having a chance to communicate with others, both sharing your ideas and your answers to what your version of gifting, the expectations and priorities are. It's also very important to listen and hear what other people's expectations are. A lot of us might carry around different expectations than others, and conflict often happens when people are not in agreement with these different things. So if we can take the chance both to share our ideas in an honest and vulnerable way, while also listening, very well, not trying to interject, but truly listening to other people's preferences and suggestions and, gifting expectations, all of that, that can help us put together a much more intentional holiday and make sure that whatever is decided is something that can ultimately hopefully be a compromise or a win-win for everyone. So there aren't negative feelings or resentment, brewing beneath the surface, and it can be actually just a fun time to see one another. Lastly, and probably the most important, tip number 5 is to stop with the unrealistic expectations. Life is not a Hallmark movie, and there are some moments of the holiday season that just aren't very fun or don't turn out like they would if it was a movie. But that's okay if we think back a couple tips ago to really lean into those simple pleasures and focus on quality time. We can take any hiccups or things that didn't turn out as well in stride and maybe even laugh about them later. If we keep our expectations not necessarily low, but just ready to be in the present moment and enjoy the time more, I think ultimately you'll have a much more positive time. When my expectations are too high in certain situations, or I'm really hoping for a magical moment, I find that I'm much more likely to be let down rather than when I'm just going with the flow and hey, if there's a magical moment that happens, how awesome is that? I can fully embrace it without, the hype of trying to set it up, plan it, wait for it. It's just much more stressful that way. So I encourage you to try to check those expectations at the door and just focus on what is rather than what you need it to be or what you are desperately trying for it to be. Sometimes it's just not what our expectations are. I hope you found these tips helpful. If you want to check out that one I did about Black Friday or general consumerism, you can do that here, as well as check out some other videos here. Thank you so much for being a part of Abundantly Minimal. If you aren't yet part of our community, you can subscribe up here, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!